The fire had taken everything from her except her life, and some days Rebecca Anderson wondered if that mercy had been a curse. She stood behind the counter of Miller's General Store in Tombstone, Arizona, her right hand trembling as she wrapped brown paper around Mrs. Henderson's order of flour and sugar, keeping her face angled away so the woman would not have to look at the twisted mass of scars that covered the left side of her face and neck. It was April of 1882, and the desert heat was already beginning to settle over the town like a heavy blanket, making the tight scar tissue ache in ways that never quite stopped. Mrs. Henderson took her package with a polite nod, her eyes flickering over Rebecca's face for just a moment, before darting away with that mixture of pity and discomfort that Rebecca had come to expect. The bell above the door chimed as the woman left, and Rebecca exhaled slowly, her fingers moving to touch the ruined skin along her jawline. 3 years had passed since the house fire in Missouri that had killed her parents and left her marked forever. 3 years since she had looked in a mirror and recognized herself. The door opened again, bringing with it a gust of hot wind and dust. Rebecca turned instinctively away, presenting her right profile to whoever had entered. She heard the heavy footsteps of boots on the wooden floor, the jingle of spurs and the subtle creak of leather. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and soft, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe further south. "I am looking for some supplies. Beans, coffee, hardtack if you have it. I will be heading out into the desert for a few weeks." "Of course," Rebecca said, keeping her face turned away as she moved toward the shelves along the back wall. "How many pounds of beans do you need?" 10 should do it. "And 5 pounds of coffee." She began gathering the items, hyper-aware of the man's presence behind her. She could feel his eyes on her, and she tilted her head further to the right, letting her dark hair fall forward like a curtain. Her hands worked quickly, efficiently, wrapping and measuring and calculating prices in her head. "You are new to working here," the man said. It was not quite a question. "I have been here 6 months," Rebecca replied, her voice quiet. She kept moving, kept her back to him, kept the ruined side of her face hidden in shadow. "I have been away," he said simply. "Working a ranch out near Fort Huachuca. The name is Vincent York." Rebecca nodded without turning around. She had heard of the York Ranch, a sprawling cattle operation that supplied beef to the Army garrison and the mining camps scattered throughout the territory. She placed the wrapped packages on the counter and finally turned, but she kept her chin tucked down and her hair positioned carefully. "That will be $3.40, she said to the counter. Vincent York stepped forward, and Rebecca caught a glimpse of him from the corner of her eye. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and a sun-bronzed face that looked weathered but not unkind. He placed the money on the counter, coins clinking softly against the wood. "Thank you, miss," he said. Then, after a pause, "What is your name?" Rebecca's fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. Most people in Tombstone knew her by now, knew to look away, knew not to stare. But this man had been away, and there was something in his voice that made her chest ache with an old longing she had thought burned away with everything else. "Rebecca Anderson," she said softly. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Anderson." She nodded, still not looking up, and began to gather his purchases. But as she reached for the bag of coffee, her hand shook, and the package slipped from her fingers. Vincent moved quickly, catching it before it hit the floor, and in that moment, Rebecca's carefully arranged hair fell back from her face. She froze, waiting for the sharp intake of breath, the widening of eyes, the stumbling backward step. But Vincent simply placed the coffee in the crate with the other supplies and looked at her directly, his gray eyes meeting hers with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then he picked up his supplies and walked toward the door. He paused there, his hand on the frame, and looked back at her. "I will be back in town in a few weeks, Miss Anderson. I hope to see you again." The door closed behind him before Rebecca could find her voice to respond. She stood there for a long moment, her heart beating too fast, her damaged hand pressed against her damaged face. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her without that flicker of horror or pity. It had been so long since she had felt anything but the crushing weight of her own ugliness. The afternoon passed in a blur of customers and transactions. Rebecca moved through them mechanically, her mind returning again and again to those gray eyes and that quiet voice. It meant nothing, she told herself. He had simply been polite. Tomorrow he would be gone into the desert, and in a few weeks he would have forgotten her entirely. Men like Vincent York did not look twice at women like her. Not anymore. Not ever again. When Mr. Miller returned from his lunch at the hotel, Rebecca gathered her shawl and her small reticule and stepped out into the blazing afternoon heat. She lived in a small room behind the Chinese laundry on Fremont Street, a space barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand. But it was cheap, and the elderly couple who owned the laundry asked no questions and did not stare. She walked quickly, keeping her head down, her hand coming up unconsciously to shield the left side of her face. "Rebecca," a voice called out, and she turned to see Sarah Mitchell hurrying toward her, her blue skirts kicking up little clouds of dust. Sarah was one of the few people in Tombstone who had shown Rebecca genuine kindness, inviting her to church socials and sitting with her even when others whispered. "Hello, Sarah," Rebecca said, managing a smile with the right side of her mouth. The left side did not move quite right anymore. "I was hoping I would run into you," Sarah said, slightly breathless. "There is a dance next Saturday at the town hall. Please say you will come. It has been months since you attended anything social." Rebecca shook her head. "I do not think that would be wise." "Nonsense. You cannot hide yourself away forever." Sarah's voice was kind but firm. "You are only 22 years old, Rebecca. You have a whole life ahead of you. A life that no one wants to look at," Rebecca said quietly, and immediately regretted the bitterness in her voice. Sarah reached out and took Rebecca's hand, squeezing it gently. "That is not true. And even if some people are too foolish to see past your scars, that is their failing, not yours." Rebecca wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that somewhere, somehow, there could be more to her life than hiding behind counters and hurrying through streets with her face turned away. But 3 years of mirrors and stares and pitying glances had taught her otherwise. "I will think about it," she said, which they both knew meant no. Sarah sighed but did not push further. They parted ways at the corner, and Rebecca continued to her little room behind the laundry. Inside, she finally allowed herself to stop performing the careful choreography of concealment. She removed her shawl and unpinned her hair and stood before the cracked mirror that hung on the wall. The scars stretched from her left temple down across her cheek and jaw, following the line of her neck, to disappear beneath the high collar of her dress. The skin was twisted and discolored, pulled tight in some places and puckered in others. Her left eye was slightly distorted, the lid drooping at the outer corner. When she tried to smile, only the right side of her mouth moved properly. The doctors in Missouri had done what they could, but there was only so much that medicine could do for burns that severe. "I am too scarred to be beautiful," she said softly to her reflection, testing the words. They were not self-pity, just simple fact. She had been pretty once, or so people had said. Brown eyes and dark hair and a smile that her mother had called sunshine. All of that was gone now, burned away in the fire that had taken everything else. She turned away from the mirror and began to change into her nightdress, though it was still early evening. There was no point in going out. There was nowhere she was wanted, nothing she could do except work and sleep and wake to do it all over again. This was her life now, and she had made her peace with it. Or so she told herself. But that night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the sounds of Tombstone settling into its evening rhythms, Rebecca found her thoughts drifting back to Vincent York and the way he had looked at her. Not through her, not around her, but at her. Directly and without flinching. It probably meant nothing. It probably meant everything. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart beat beneath her palm, and allowed herself the dangerous luxury of wondering what if. The days passed slowly, marked by the steady rhythm of work. Rebecca measured and wrapped and calculated, kept her face turned away, spoke in her quiet voice. Mr. Miller was a decent employer, never commenting on her appearance, never asking her to work the front of the store when important customers came in. She was grateful for the job, even if it meant spending her days in partial shadow. 2 weeks after Vincent York had first walked into the store, Rebecca was restocking the shelves when she heard the familiar jingle of spurs. She turned, and there he was, his hat in his hands, his gray eyes finding hers immediately. This time, he was not alone. A younger man stood beside him, barely out of his teenage years, with the same dark hair and similar features. "Miss Anderson," Vincent said, nodding to her. "This is my brother Thomas. He is helping me with the ranch now." Thomas York gave her a friendly smile, but his eyes widened slightly when he saw the scars. Rebecca felt the old familiar twist in her stomach and turned away, moving behind the counter where she felt safer. "What can I help you with today?" she asked, addressing her words to the space between them. "We need supplies for the ranch," Vincent said. "Flour, sugar, salt, ammunition for the rifles. Thomas, go see if they have the rifle shells in the back storeroom." Thomas nodded and disappeared through the curtain that separated the main store from the storage area. Rebecca felt a flutter of anxiety at being left alone with Vincent, but she forced herself to focus on gathering the items he had requested. Her hands moved automatically, reaching for familiar packages and containers. "Miss Anderson," Vincent said quietly, "would you look at me, please?" Rebecca's hands stilled. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Slowly, reluctantly, she turned and lifted her face, letting him see the full extent of the damage. She waited for the pity, the discomfort, the polite excuse to look away. Instead, Vincent took a step closer to the counter. "I have been thinking about you," he said. "These past 2 weeks out on the range, I found myself remembering the way you spoke, the kindness in your eyes. I was wondering if you might allow me to take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant." Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I do not understand." "I am asking if I can court you," Vincent said simply. "If you are not already spoken for, that is. Are you mocking me?" The words came out harsher than she intended, but she could not help it. This had to be some kind of cruel joke. Vincent's expression shifted, something that might have been hurt flickering across his features. "I would never mock you, Miss Anderson. I am in earnest." "Look at me," Rebecca said, her voice rising slightly. She gestured to her face, to the twisted scars and damaged skin. "Look at what I am. You cannot possibly want to be seen with me." "I am looking at you," Vincent said quietly, "and I see a woman who has survived something terrible. I see strength and dignity. I see beauty that no fire could ever burn away." Rebecca felt her eyes filling with tears, and she blinked them back furiously. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying." Vincent's voice was steady, patient. "I spent 2 weeks out in the desert thinking about whether I should say anything at all. I am not a man who speaks lightly, Miss Anderson. When I say I see beauty in you, I mean it with everything I am." Thomas emerged from the back room then, his arms full of ammunition boxes, and the moment shattered. Rebecca turned away quickly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. She finished gathering their supplies in silence while Vincent paid, her mind whirling. This could not be real. Men like him did not court women like her. It was impossible. But as the York brothers were leaving, Vincent paused at the door. "I will be in town on Saturday evening," he said. "If you change your mind about dinner, I will be at the hotel at 6 o'clock. I will wait for you there." Then he was gone, and Rebecca was left standing behind the counter, trembling and confused and filled with a terrifying hope she did not know what to do with. That evening, Sarah Mitchell came by the store just as Rebecca was closing up. "You look like you have seen a ghost," Sarah said, studying Rebecca's face with concern. "Something stranger than that," Rebecca said. She told Sarah about Vincent's invitation, watching her friend's face light up with excitement. "But that is wonderful," Sarah exclaimed. "Vincent York is one of the most respected ranchers in the territory, and he is handsome too, from what I have heard." "He must be blind or mad," Rebecca said flatly. "There is no other explanation. Or perhaps he is simply a man of sense who can see what others miss." Sarah took Rebecca's hands in hers. "You must go to dinner with him. You must at least give him a chance." "I cannot." Rebecca pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Sarah, can you imagine what people would say, what they would think? A man like him with a woman like me, they would laugh at both of us." "Let them laugh," Sarah said fiercely. "When did you start caring so much about what cruel people think?" "Since I became someone they could be cruel about," Rebecca said softly. Sarah's expression softened. "I know you have been hurt, Rebecca. I know the world has not been kind to you, but you cannot let fear keep you from living. If this man sees something in you worth pursuing, does he not deserve the chance to prove himself?" Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to list all the 100 reasons why this was a terrible idea. But underneath the fear and the doubt was that dangerous little seed of hope, and it was growing stronger by the moment. What if Vincent truly meant what he said? What if there was a chance, however small, that someone could look past her scars and see the woman underneath? "I do not even know what I would wear," she said finally, and Sarah's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Leave that to me," she said. "Saturday arrived too quickly and too slowly all at once." Rebecca spent the intervening days in a state of nervous anxiety, second-guessing her decision 1,000 times. She went to work. She returned to her room. She stared at herself in the mirror and tried to imagine sitting across a table from Vincent York in a restaurant full of people. Her imagination failed her every time. Sarah arrived at her room at 4 o'clock that afternoon, carrying a dress bag and a small case that proved to contain various pins and ribbons. "We are going to make you look absolutely stunning," Sarah declared, and set to work before Rebecca could protest. The dress was a deep green silk, high-necked to cover the scars on Rebecca's neck, but beautifully tailored to fit her slim figure. Sarah arranged Rebecca's dark hair in a soft style that allowed some of it to fall forward naturally, partially obscuring the damaged side of her face without looking like she was deliberately hiding. "There," Sarah said finally, stepping back to admire her work. "Look at yourself." Rebecca turned to the mirror reluctantly, and for a moment she barely recognized herself. The dress brought out the color in her eyes, and Sarah's careful styling made her look elegant rather than disfigured. The scars were still visible, still impossible to miss, but somehow they seemed less monstrous than usual. "I am too scarred to be beautiful," Rebecca whispered, but there was less certainty in her voice than before. "Nonsense," Sarah said firmly. "Now go, do not keep him waiting." The walk to the hotel felt both endless and far too short. Rebecca kept her head down, her hand coming up repeatedly to touch her hair to make sure it was still in place. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy. What was she doing? This was madness. She should turn around, go back to her room, send word that she was ill. But then she was climbing the steps to the hotel entrance, and there was Vincent York standing in the lobby, wearing a clean white shirt and a black vest, his dark hair slicked back and his gray eyes lighting up when he saw her. "Miss Anderson," he said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "I am so glad you came. I was not sure you would." "I almost did not," Rebecca admitted. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Vincent offered her his arm. "I am honored that you decided to take the chance. Shall we?" The hotel restaurant was half full, and Rebecca felt every eye in the room turn toward them as they entered. She heard the whispers, saw the stares, felt the weight of judgment and curiosity pressing down on her. Her instinct was to flee, to pull away from Vincent and run back to the safety of her little room. But Vincent kept walking, his arm steady beneath her hand, his head high as if he was proud to be seen with her. He led her to a table by the window, pulled out her chair, and waited until she was seated before taking his own place across from her. The waiter appeared, a young man whose eyes widened when he saw Rebecca's face, but Vincent ordered for both of them without seeming to notice the reaction. "I hope you like steak," Vincent said. "The hotel serves the best beef in Tombstone. Most of it comes from my ranch, so I might be biased." Rebecca managed a small smile. "I am sure it will be wonderful." "Tell me about yourself," Vincent said. "Where are you from originally?" "Missouri," Rebecca said. "A small town outside of Kansas City. My parents had a farm there." Her hand moved unconsciously to her scarred cheek. "There was a fire 3 years ago. The house burned down. My parents did not make it out." "I am sorry," Vincent said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made Rebecca's throat tighten. "That must have been terrible." "The fire started at night," Rebecca found herself saying. Words she had never spoken aloud to anyone in Tombstone came spilling out. "I woke up and the whole house was full of smoke. I tried to get to their room, but the flames were everywhere. Part of the ceiling collapsed. The burning timber hit my face and pinned me down. I thought I was going to die there. But a neighbor saw the fire and came running. He pulled me out, but by then it was too late for my parents." Vincent listened without interrupting, his gray eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You are one of the bravest people I have ever met," he said quietly. "I am not brave," Rebecca said. "I am just alive." "Living takes courage," Vincent said. "Especially after losing everything, you could have given up. Instead, you came all the way to Arizona territory and started a new life. That takes more strength than most people ever have to find." The waiter returned with their meals, and Rebecca was grateful for the distraction. She was not accustomed to being seen this way, to being praised rather than pitied. It made her feel vulnerable and exposed in ways that had nothing to do with her scars. "What about you?" she asked, wanting to shift the focus away from herself. "Have you always been a rancher?" Vincent cut into his steak, his movements economical and practiced. "My family came to Arizona from Texas when I was 15. My father bought a small piece of land near the fort and started running cattle. It was hard work, but it was good work. He died 5 years ago and I took over the ranch. Thomas came out to help me last year. He is still learning, but he has got a good head for it." "It must be difficult, running a ranch in the desert," Rebecca said. "It has its challenges," Vincent admitted. "Water is always a concern, and there are problems with raiders sometimes, both Apache and white men. But it is a good life. Honest work under an open sky. I cannot imagine doing anything else." They talked through the meal. the conversation flowing more easily than Rebecca would have thought possible. Vincent told her stories about the ranch, about stubborn cattle and clever horses, about thunderstorms that swept across the desert and turned the dry washes into raging rivers. Rebecca told him about working at the general store, about the interesting characters who came through Tombstone, about the books she liked to read when she could afford to buy them. It was only when the meal was finished, and Vincent walked her home, that Rebecca became fully aware again of the stares and whispers that followed them through the streets. She tried to keep her head up, tried to ignore the pointing fingers and the not-quite quiet comments, but each one felt like a small knife cutting into her. At the door to the laundry, Vincent paused. "May I see you again?" he asked. Rebecca looked up at him, at his honest, open face, and felt that dangerous hope growing stronger. "Why?" she asked. "Vincent, I need you to tell me why. Is this some kind of charitable act? Do you feel sorry for me?" "No," Vincent said firmly. "I do not feel sorry for you. I admire you. I find you interesting and intelligent and, yes, beautiful. Not in spite of your scars, but as someone whose beauty runs deeper than skin. You are too beautiful to hide," he added softly. "That is what I thought the first time I saw you, turning away behind that counter. The world needs to see you, Rebecca. You have spent too long in the shadows." Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks before she could stop them. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to be seen." "Then let me help you learn," Vincent said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her right cheek. "May I see you again?" he asked once more. "Yes," Rebecca breathed. "Yes, you may." Vincent smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Good. I will be in town next Saturday. Perhaps we could take a walk if the weather is not too hot." Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice. Vincent tipped his hat to her and walked away into the evening darkness, and Rebecca stood there for a long moment, her hand pressed to the place on her cheek where he had touched her. The next few weeks passed in a strange sort of dream. Vincent came to town every Saturday, and they spent the afternoons together, walking along the edges of Tombstone where the desert began to reclaim the land. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to practical matters of daily life. Vincent was patient with her silences, understanding when she needed to turn away from curious stares, never pushing her to be more visible than she was ready to be. But slowly, gradually, Rebecca found herself caring less about the stares and whispers. When she was with Vincent, the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them, and the opinions of strangers mattered less than the sound of his voice and the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Sarah was delighted by the developing courtship and insisted on hearing every detail after each of Rebecca's outings with Vincent. "I told you," she said triumphantly. "I told you there were good men in the world who could see past surfaces." "He wants me to come out to the ranch," Rebecca said one evening, her voice uncertain. "To see where he lives, to meet Thomas properly. But Sarah, that means riding out into the desert for hours, just the two of us. What will people say?" "That you are being courted by a good man," Sarah said firmly. "Rebecca, when are you going to stop letting fear rule your life?" "I am not afraid," Rebecca protested, but even as she said it, she knew it was not quite true. She was afraid. Afraid of trusting this happiness. Afraid it would be snatched away. Afraid that Vincent would wake up one day and realize what a mistake he had made. But the following Saturday, she found herself sitting beside Vincent in his wagon as they drove out of Tombstone into the vast emptiness of the desert. The sun was climbing toward its zenith, and the heat was already intense, but there was something exhilarating about the openness of the landscape, the sense of possibility that stretched out in every direction. The York Ranch lay about 10 miles outside of town, nestled in a valley where underground springs provided enough water to keep a small herd of cattle alive and growing. The ranch house itself was modest, a single-story adobe structure with a wide porch and a sturdy barn nearby. Thomas emerged as they pulled up, wiping his hands on his trousers and grinning at his brother. "About time you got here," Thomas called. "I was starting to think you got lost." "We took the scenic route," Vincent said, helping Rebecca down from the wagon. His hands were strong and steady at her waist, and Rebecca felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. Thomas showed Rebecca around the ranch while Vincent tended to the horses. The younger York brother was friendly and enthusiastic, clearly proud of what he and Vincent had built. Rebecca saw the careful management in every aspect of the operation, from the well-maintained fences to the organized barn to the healthy cattle grazing in the distance. "Vincent talks about you constantly," Thomas said as they walked. "Rebecca said this. Rebecca thinks that. I was starting to worry he had invented you." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "He talks about me all the time," Thomas confirmed. "I have never seen him like this." "Vincent is usually so serious, so focused on the ranch, but you make him smile. That is worth more than you might think." They ate lunch on the porch, simple fare of bread and cheese and cold chicken, but it tasted better than any restaurant meal. Rebecca sat in the shade and listened to the brothers talk about their plans for expanding the herd, about the new wells they wanted to dig, about the future they were building together. And somewhere in the middle of that ordinary afternoon, Rebecca realized that she was happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy, in a way she had not been since before the fire. On the ride back to Tombstone that evening, with the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold behind them, Vincent reached over and took Rebecca's hand. "I know this is happening quickly," he said, "but I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I am courting you because I want to marry you, Rebecca, if you will have me." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "Vincent, are you certain? Really, truly certain? Because once people know we are engaged, there will be no going back." "Everyone will talk. Everyone will have opinions." "Let them talk," Vincent said. "Let them have all the opinions they want. The only opinion that matters to me is yours." Rebecca looked down at their joined hands, at his tanned fingers intertwined with her scarred ones. "I care for you," she said softly. "More than I thought I could ever care for anyone again. But I am terrified, Vincent, terrified that this is all a dream and I will wake up and you will be gone." "I am not going anywhere," Vincent said firmly. He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "Rebecca Anderson, you are the strongest, most courageous woman I have ever known. You have survived horrors that would have broken most people. You face every day with dignity and grace, even when the world is cruel. I see you, all of you. And I love everything I see." "I love you too," Rebecca whispered, the words escaping before she could think better of them. But once they were out, she realized they were true. Somewhere between that first meeting in the general store and this moment under the darkening desert sky, she had fallen in love with this quiet, steady man who saw beauty, where everyone else saw only scars. Vincent leaned forward and kissed her then, gentle and careful, his lips touching first her undamaged cheek, and then, with infinite tenderness, the twisted skin of her scars. Rebecca felt something break open inside her, some wall she had built around her heart crumbling away, and she kissed him back with all the longing and hope and fear she had been carrying for so long. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were trembling. "Marry me," Vincent said. "Not someday, not eventually, soon, as soon as we can arrange it." "Yes," Rebecca said, and this time there was no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, I will marry you." The news of their engagement spread through Tombstone like wildfire. Rebecca had expected criticism and mockery, but what she got instead was a mixture of reactions that surprised her. Some people were genuinely happy for them, congratulating Vincent on his choice and wishing Rebecca well. Others were puzzled, unable to understand why a successful rancher would choose a scarred woman when he could have his pick of prettier prospects. And a few were openly hostile, suggesting that Rebecca must have trapped him somehow, that she was taking advantage of his kindness. Rebecca tried not to listen to the negative voices, but it was hard. The doubts they expressed aloud were the same ones that whispered in her own mind late at night. Was she being selfish? Was she ruining Vincent's life by allowing him to marry her? Would he wake up one day filled with regret? She was wrestling with these thoughts one afternoon at the store when a woman she did not recognize entered. The woman was in her 30s, elegantly dressed in a way that spoke of money and status. She approached the counter with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You must be Rebecca Anderson," the woman said. "I am Constance Perry. My husband owns the mining operation up in the hills." Rebecca recognized the name. The Perry Mining Company was one of the largest employers in the territory. "How can I help you, Mrs. Perry?" "I heard you are engaged to Vincent York," Constance said, her voice light and conversational. "I wanted to meet the woman who managed such a remarkable feat." There was something in her tone that made Rebecca's shoulders tense. "Vincent and I are engaged, yes." "How interesting," Constance said. She picked up a spool of thread from the counter and examined it idly. "You know, Vincent was quite sought after before he met you. Several young ladies in Tombstone had their eyes on him, pretty girls from good families. Is there something specific you need, Mrs. Perry?" Rebecca asked, fighting to keep her voice level. "I just think it is remarkable," Constance continued as if Rebecca had not spoken, "how a woman in your position managed to secure such a desirable husband. Some might say desperate times call for desperate measures." The implication was clear, and Rebecca felt anger rising up to replace her uncertainty. "Vincent proposed to me of his own free will," she said quietly but firmly. "I did not trap him or deceive him. He knows exactly who and what I am." "Of course," Constance said with that same false smile. "I am sure you are very grateful for his charity." "It is not charity," Rebecca said, her voice stronger now. "It is love. Perhaps you should try to understand the difference." Constance's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "Well, I suppose we will see how long that lasts once the novelty wears off. Good day, Miss Anderson." She swept out of the store, leaving Rebecca shaking with anger and hurt. Mr. Miller emerged from the back room, his weathered face creased with concern. "Do not listen to that woman," he said gruffly. "Constance Perry has a cruel streak a mile wide. She is just jealous because her own marriage is a cold business arrangement." "She is right, though," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "People do think I trapped Vincent. They think he is with me out of pity." "Then people are fools," Mr. Miller said. "I have seen the way that young man looks at you when he comes in here. That is not pity. That is the real thing." Rebecca wanted to believe him, but the encounter with Constance had shaken her confidence. When Vincent came to town that evening, she told him what had happened, watching his face darken with anger. "That woman has no right to speak to you that way," he said. "I should go to her husband." "No," Rebecca said quickly. "That will only make things worse. Vincent, maybe she is right. Maybe you should reconsider this. You could have anyone. You do not need the burden of a wife people will mock." Vincent took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, Rebecca Anderson. You are not a burden, you are a gift. Those scars you carry are proof that you are a survivor, and I am honored that you are willing to share your life with me. If people want to talk, let them talk. Their opinions mean nothing compared to what we have together." "But what if you change your mind?" Rebecca whispered. What if someday you look at me and wish you had chosen differently? That will never happen, Vincent said with absolute certainty. You are everything I want, Rebecca, everything I need, and I am going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church, with Sarah as Rebecca's attendant and Thomas as Vincent's best man. Rebecca wore a cream-colored dress that Sarah had helped her make, and she walked down the aisle with her head held high, refusing to hide her face even though half the town had turned out to watch. Some came out of genuine affection, some out of curiosity, and some probably hoping to witness a disaster. But Rebecca did not care. Her eyes were fixed on Vincent, standing at the altar in his best suit, his face full of love and pride and absolute certainty. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her in front of everyone, his hands cradling her scarred face with infinite tenderness. And for the first time in 3 years, Rebecca felt truly beautiful. The reception was held at the hotel, a modest affair with cake and punch and dancing. Rebecca was nervous about the dancing, certain that she would be too self-conscious to enjoy it, but Vincent swept her into his arms and moved her around the floor with such confidence that she forgot to be afraid. They danced 3 dances in a row before Vincent finally led her outside onto the hotel's back terrace where they could catch their breath. "How are you holding up, Mrs. York?" he asked, and Rebecca felt a thrill at hearing her new name. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Though I think some people are still waiting for you to come to your senses and run away screaming." "Then they are going to be waiting a very long time," Vincent said. He pulled her close, and Rebecca rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Ready to go home." Home. The word sent a shiver through her. Home was not her tiny room behind the laundry anymore. Home was the ranch, the adobe house in the desert valley, a place where she would wake up beside Vincent every morning and fall asleep in his arms every night. They left the reception amid a shower of rice and good wishes, climbing into the wagon for the long drive out to the ranch. The sun was setting as they left Tombstone behind, painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold. Rebecca sat pressed against Vincent's side, his arm around her shoulders, and felt a profound sense of peace settling over her. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The ranch house was dark when they arrived, Thomas having discreetly arranged to spend the night in town to give them privacy. Vincent lit the lamps one by one, filling the simple rooms with warm, golden light. Rebecca stood in the center of the main room, suddenly nervous now that they were alone. She had never been with a man before, had never expected to be with one after the fire. Her limited knowledge came from vague conversations with married women and a few carefully worded passages in novels. She did not know what Vincent expected, what he wanted, whether her damaged body would be enough for him. Vincent seemed to sense her anxiety. He crossed to her slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. "Rebecca," he said softly, "we do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We have all the time in the world." "I want to," Rebecca said, but her voice was shaking. "I am just scared. Vincent, the scars do not stop at my face and neck. They go down my shoulder and arm. What if you see the rest of me and you are repulsed?" "That will never happen," Vincent said firmly. He took her hands in his. "But if you need time, we can wait. There is no rush." Rebecca looked into his gray eyes, saw nothing but patience and love and desire that had nothing to do with pity. And she realized that if she was going to learn to stop hiding, it had to start here with him in this moment. "No more waiting," she said. "No more hiding." She reached up and began to unpin her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. Then, her hands trembling only slightly, she began to unfasten the buttons of her dress. Vincent watched her, his gaze intense but not intrusive, giving her the space to move at her own pace. When the dress finally slipped from her shoulders, revealing the full extent of the scars that covered her left side, Rebecca held her breath, waiting for his reaction. Vincent stepped forward and traced his fingers along the damaged skin with exquisite gentleness. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every part of you, every inch. Rebecca, do you understand what a gift this is? That you trust me enough to show me all of yourself?" Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Vincent said. "Let me show you how much." He picked her up and carried her to the bedroom, and there in the lamplight, he proved with his hands and his mouth and his body that every word he had spoken was true. He kissed her scars as tenderly as he kissed her undamaged skin, touched her damaged side with the same reverence as her whole side, made her feel cherished and desired, and more beautiful than she had ever felt in her life. When they finally came together, Rebecca cried out not in pain but in joy, in the overwhelming realization that she was truly loved, truly wanted, truly seen as she was. Afterward, lying in Vincent's arms with her head on his chest, Rebecca felt something fundamental shift inside her. The fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years was still there, but it was smaller now, manageable. In its place was something stronger, hope, love, the absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would not face them alone. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman in the territory," Rebecca said. "And I am thinking that I want to wake up like this every morning for the rest of my life." "That can be arranged," Vincent said, and she heard the smile in his voice. "Though I should warn you, ranch life starts early. You are going to be waking up to roosters and cattle before dawn most days." "I do not care," Rebecca said, "as long as I am waking up with you." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Rebecca woke in the deep hours of the night, disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness, Vincent's arms tightened around her immediately. "I am here," he murmured, still half asleep. "You are safe, I have got you." Rebecca pressed closer to him and let herself drift back to sleep, more content than she had ever thought possible. Life on the ranch proved to be harder work than Rebecca had anticipated, but also more rewarding. She rose with Vincent before dawn, helped with the cooking and the endless cleaning that desert dust required, learned to tend the small vegetable garden that somehow managed to grow in the harsh climate. Thomas treated her like the sister he had never had, teasing her gently and teaching her how to shoot a rifle when Vincent insisted she needed to know how to protect herself if trouble came. Rebecca still went into Tombstone once a week to help at the general store. She had offered to quit when she married, but Mr. Miller had insisted he needed her, and the truth was that Rebecca enjoyed the work. But now, when she walked through town, she did not keep her face turned away. She greeted people directly, met their eyes, refused to shrink from their stares. Some people remained uncomfortable around her, but others began to see past the scars to the person beneath. It helped that Vincent often came with her, his hand at her back or his arm through hers, making it clear to everyone that he was proud to be her husband. Summer deepened into fall, the brutal heat giving way to cooler temperatures that made working outside more bearable. Rebecca discovered that she loved the ranch, loved the vast open spaces and the hard, honest work, and the sense of building something lasting. She loved watching Vincent work with the horses and cattle, his movements efficient and sure, his connection to the land deep and instinctive. She loved the quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the desert while they talked about their day or sat in comfortable silence. In October, Rebecca realized she had not had her monthly courses in 6 weeks. At first, she thought it was stress or the change in her routine, but as another week passed and her breasts became tender and she began to feel nauseated in the mornings, she knew. She was carrying Vincent's child. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. She wanted this baby desperately, wanted to give Vincent a family, wanted to prove that her damaged body could still create life. But she was also terrified of childbirth, of the risks and the pain, of the possibility that her scarred body might not be able to carry a pregnancy to term. She told Vincent one evening after dinner, the words tumbling out in a nervous rush. "I think I am pregnant. I have missed 2 cycles now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings, and I am almost certain that we are going to have a baby." Vincent's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, wonder, pure joy, before settling on concern. "Are you all right? How are you feeling? Should we get the doctor?" "I am fine," Rebecca said, laughing a little at his panic. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am just Vincent, I am scared. What if something goes wrong? What if my body cannot do this?" "Then we will face it together," Vincent said firmly. He knelt beside her chair and took her hands. "But Rebecca, you are one of the strongest people I know. If anyone can do this, it is you." The doctor confirmed the pregnancy the following week and estimated that the baby would arrive in late May or early June. Rebecca tried not to let her anxiety show, but Vincent knew her too well to be fooled. He became even more protective than usual, insisting she rest more and work less, fussing over her until Thomas started teasing him about being a mother hen. As winter set in and Rebecca's belly began to swell with the growing child, she found herself thinking often about her own mother, wishing desperately that she could be there to offer advice and reassurance. The fire had taken so much from her, but perhaps this baby was a way of reclaiming something, of building a new family to replace the one she had lost. Sarah was thrilled by the news and immediately began making tiny clothes and blankets. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," she told Rebecca. "This baby is so lucky to have you." Rebecca wanted to believe her, but the doubts persisted. What kind of mother could she be with her damaged face and her damaged body? Would her child be ashamed of her? Would other children mock her baby for having a scarred mother? "Stop it," Vincent said one night when he found her crying in the bedroom. "I can hear you thinking from across the room. Rebecca, our child is going to love you. How could they not? You are kind and strong and brave, and you are going to teach them to see the world with compassion." "What if the baby is scared of me?" Rebecca whispered. "What if they look at my face and cry?" "Babies do not see scars," Vincent said gently. "They see the person who loves them. They see their mother. That is all that will matter." Christmas came and went in a quiet celebration, just the 3 of them at the ranch. Rebecca was 6 months along now, her belly round and prominent, the baby kicking strongly enough that Vincent could feel it when he placed his hand on her stomach. Thomas had become increasingly excited about becoming an uncle, already making plans to teach the child to ride and rope and all the skills of ranch life. "What if it is a girl?" Rebecca asked, amused. "Then I will teach her to ride and rope," Thomas said without hesitation. "Girls can learn ranch work just as well as boys." "I agree," Vincent said. "Boy or girl, this child is going to grow up knowing they can do anything they set their mind to." Rebecca felt a rush of love for both of them, these York brothers who had given her a family and a home and a future. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm, and sent a silent promise to the child growing inside her. "I will be brave for you. I will show you that scars are just stories written on skin, and that the most important things are the ones you cannot see." The winter was mild that year, but as spring approached, the weather turned unpredictable. Rain came in sudden violent storms that turned the desert into a temporary garden of wildflowers. Rebecca's due date drew closer, and Vincent became increasingly nervous, checking on her constantly, making sure they had everything they needed for the birth. The pain started on a warm evening in late May. Rebecca was helping with dinner when the first contraction hit, doubling her over with its intensity. Vincent went pale but sprang into action, sending Thomas racing into town to fetch the doctor and the midwife while he helped Rebecca to the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following afternoon. Rebecca had never experienced pain like this, wave after wave of agony that eclipsed even the memory of burning. She clung to Vincent's hand, to his voice, to his steady presence beside her. The doctor and the midwife worked efficiently, offering encouragement and instruction, but there were long stretches when Rebecca was certain she could not do this, could not survive this, could not possibly bring this child into the world. "You can do this," Vincent kept saying, over and over like a prayer. "You are so strong, Rebecca. You can do this." And somehow, in the fading light of that May evening, she did. With one final push that felt like it might tear her apart, Rebecca felt the baby slip free. There was a moment of terrifying silence, and then a thin wail filled the room, the most beautiful sound Rebecca had ever heard. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the squirming, screaming bundle on Rebecca's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Rebecca looked down at her son, at his red, wrinkled face and his tiny fists waving in the air, and fell instantly, completely in love. Vincent leaned over them both, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, and touched the baby's head with one gentle finger. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Rebecca, he is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked, unable to look away from her son's face. Vincent was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "What about Samuel? It was my father's name." "Samuel York," Rebecca said, testing the sound of it. "I like that. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world." The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming, and more wonderful than Rebecca could have imagined. Samuel was a hungry baby, nursing frequently and sleeping in short bursts that left Rebecca perpetually tired, but also filled with a fierce protective love she had not known she was capable of feeling. Vincent was a devoted father, walking Samuel around the house at night when he fussed, changing his diapers with surprising competence, sitting beside Rebecca while she nursed and looking at them both with an expression of absolute wonder. Thomas was equally smitten with his nephew, holding Samuel with exaggerated care and talking to him in a gentle voice that made Rebecca want to laugh and cry at the same time. "You are going to be a rancher. Yes, you are," Thomas would coo at the baby. "Just like your papa and your uncle." Sarah came to visit as soon as Rebecca was up for company, bringing gifts and advice and offering to help with anything Rebecca needed. "He is beautiful," Sarah said, holding Samuel carefully. "And look, he has your eyes." Rebecca looked at her son, and it was true. Samuel's eyes were the same brown as hers, and there was something in the shape of his face that reminded her of her own father. It felt like a gift, this connection to the family she had lost, carried forward in this new life she had created. As the summer wore on and Samuel grew from a tiny, helpless newborn into a more robust infant, Rebecca found herself settling into motherhood with more confidence than she had expected. She learned to interpret Samuel's different cries, to soothe him when he was fussy, to delight in his first smiles and the way his eyes would light up when he saw Vincent or Thomas. The scars that had once defined her became just another part of her daily reality, something Samuel touched with his curious fingers, but gave no more significance than he gave her hair or her hands. One afternoon in August, Rebecca was sitting on the porch with Samuel in her arms when a wagon pulled up to the house. Rebecca did not recognize the woman who climbed down, an older lady with silver hair and a kind face. "Mrs. York," the woman called. "I am Martha Stevens. I live on the ranch about 15 miles east of here." "Hello," Rebecca said, rising carefully with Samuel. "What can I do for you? I heard you had a baby," Martha said, climbing the porch steps. "And I wanted to come by to offer my congratulations and to see if you needed anything. It can be hard, being out here away from town, especially with a first child." "That is very kind of you," Rebecca said, touched by the gesture. Martha peered at Samuel, who was awake and looking around with the vaguely confused expression newborns always seem to have. "He is a handsome boy. Looks like his father, I think. May I hold him?" Rebecca hesitated only a moment before handing Samuel over. She watched Martha's face carefully, waiting for the moment when the older woman would notice the scars, waiting for the expression to change from warmth to pity or discomfort. But Martha just smiled at Samuel and then looked up at Rebecca with genuine kindness. "You know, I heard talk in town about you," she said bluntly. "People saying all sorts of foolish things about Vincent York marrying a woman with scars. But looking at you now, seeing this beautiful baby and this lovely home, I think those people are blind fools. You have got something real here, Mrs. York, something worth more than a perfect face." Rebecca felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I also wanted to tell you," Martha continued, "that if you ever need help or company, you are welcome at our ranch anytime. We have got 4 daughters, all of them grown now, but I remember how lonely it could be when they were small. Women need other women, especially out here." Martha stayed for an hour, sharing stories about her own children and offering practical advice about everything from teething to weaning. By the time she left, Rebecca felt like she had made a genuine friend, someone who saw past her appearance to the person underneath. "She was nice," Vincent said that evening when Rebecca told him about the visit. "She was," Rebecca agreed. "It is strange. I spent so long being afraid of how people would see me, and now I am realizing that the good people, the ones worth knowing, they do not care about the scars. They see me." "I told you," Vincent said, pulling her close. "You are too beautiful to hide." Rebecca rested her head on his shoulder, watching Samuel sleep in his cradle beside their bed. "I do not want to hide anymore," she said quietly. "I want our son to grow up seeing his mother live without fear. I want him to learn that scars are not something to be ashamed of." "He will learn that," Vincent said with certainty, "because he has the strongest, bravest mother in the territory." The seasons turned, summer fading into fall and then into winter. Samuel grew with astonishing speed, learning to hold his head up, then to sit, then to crawl with determined intensity across the floor of the ranch house. Rebecca discovered reserves of patience and energy she had not known she possessed, finding joy in the smallest milestones of her son's development. When Samuel was 8 months old, Rebecca realized she was pregnant again. This time the news was less frightening, tempered by the knowledge that her body could do this, that she could survive childbirth and come out the other side. Vincent was thrilled at the prospect of another child, though he insisted even more firmly that Rebecca take it easy and not overwork herself. "We are going to have a big family," he said one night, lying beside her in bed with his hand on her growing belly. "Fill this house with children and laughter." "That sounds perfect," Rebecca said. She thought about the family she had lost in the fire, the parents who would never meet their grandchildren, and felt a bittersweet ache. But alongside the grief was gratitude, for the new family she had built, for the love that surrounded her every day. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived on a cool morning in June of 1884. This labor was shorter but no less intense, and when the midwife placed the baby girl in Rebecca's arms, Rebecca wept with joy at the sight of her daughter's perfect tiny face. Samuel, now 15 months old, was fascinated by his baby sister, patting her head with gentle hands and demanding to hold her at every opportunity. Life on the ranch settled into a busy but satisfying rhythm. Rebecca's days were full of children and housework, and helping with the ranch operations when she could. Vincent and Thomas expanded the herd, built new corrals, dug a deeper well. The York Ranch became known throughout the territory as a well-run operation with good cattle and honest owners. Rebecca still went into Tombstone occasionally, usually with Vincent and the children. She no longer felt self-conscious about her scars, no longer tried to hide or turn away. People had become accustomed to seeing her, and most treated her with the respect due to a wife and mother and productive member of the community. There were still some who stared or whispered, but Rebecca had learned to let their opinions roll off her like water off stone. She knew who she was now. She knew her worth. When Rose was 2 and Samuel 4, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant for a third time. This baby, another boy they named Henry, arrived in the spring of 1886. Thomas, who had married a local girl named Elizabeth the previous year, announced shortly after Henry's birth that he and Elizabeth were expecting their first child as well. The York family was growing, spreading roots deep into the Arizona soil. The years passed in a blur of children and cattle and endless work and deep satisfaction. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and showed an early talent for working with horses. Rose was fearless and outgoing, climbing everything in sight and talking nonstop from the moment she mastered language. Henry was gentle and quiet, content to follow his older siblings around and observe the world with solemn brown eyes. In 1889, when Samuel was 7 and Rose 5 and Henry 3, Rebecca gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Matthew and Grace. The ranch house felt wonderfully chaotic with 5 children underfoot, and Rebecca often fell into bed exhausted at night, but she would not have changed a single thing. This was the life she had never thought she could have, the family she had believed impossible after the fire. Every day felt like a gift. Vincent had been right all those years ago when he had told her she was too beautiful to hide. Not because her scars had somehow disappeared or become less noticeable, they were still there, still visible, still a permanent part of her appearance. But because beauty, Rebecca had learned, was not about smooth skin or symmetrical features. It was about living fully, loving completely, refusing to let fear or shame dictate the terms of your existence. One afternoon in late summer, Rebecca stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out at the life she and Vincent had built together. Samuel and Rose were helping Vincent mend a fence in the distance. Henry was playing in the dirt with a collection of small wooden animals Thomas had carved for him. The twins were napping inside, their small bodies curled together in the cradle they still shared. Thomas and Elizabeth's little daughter, Clara, was visiting for the afternoon, following Rose around with devoted admiration. Sarah came riding up on her mare, and Rebecca waved to her friend. Sarah had married a lawyer in Tombstone 2 years earlier, and though they had not yet been blessed with children, Sarah remained one of Rebecca's closest confidants. "This place is absolutely overrun with children," Sarah said, laughing as she dismounted. "I swear you have more every time I visit." "Only 5, Rebecca said. "Well, 6 if you count Clara visiting." "Only 5, Sarah repeated in mock horror. "You have got your hands full, Rebecca York." "I do," Rebecca agreed, "and I love every minute of it." They sat on the porch together, watching the children play and the sun start its slow descent toward the horizon. "Do you remember," Sarah said after a while, "that day I found you at the general store and I asked you to come to the dance?" "I remember," Rebecca said. "I told you I was too scarred to be beautiful." "And look at you now," Sarah said softly. "You are absolutely radiant. Happiness looks good on you." Rebecca thought about that first meeting with Vincent, about the way he had looked at her without flinching. She thought about the journey from that moment to this one, all the fear she had overcome, all the joy she had discovered. She thought about the man who had seen past her scars to the woman underneath, who had loved her fiercely and completely and helped her learn to love herself. "I am lucky," Rebecca said finally. "Vincent gave me my life back." "No," Sarah corrected gently. "You gave yourself your life back. Vincent just helped you see what was already there." That evening, after all the children were finally asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Rebecca found Vincent on the porch. He was sitting in his favorite chair, looking out at the desert stars that blazed in the Arizona sky. Rebecca sat on his lap, tucking herself against his chest, and Vincent's arms came around her automatically. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life is from what I thought it would be," Rebecca said. "When I came to Tombstone, I thought I was coming to disappear. To hide myself away where no one knew me, where I could be invisible." "You were never invisible," Vincent said. "Not to me, I know." Rebecca turned her face up to kiss him. "You taught me to see myself differently, to stop hiding." "You did the hard work," Vincent said. "All I did was love you." "That was everything," Rebecca said. "Your love was everything." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere in the house, one of the twins made a small sound in their sleep, and Rebecca automatically tensed to get up, but the baby settled again without waking. Vincent's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked softly. "Marrying me? You could have had anyone." "I have asked you never to say that again," Vincent said, but there was no anger in his voice, just patient love. "Rebecca, you are everything I wanted and things I did not even know I needed. You are my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in every way that matters. I have never regretted a single moment. Not even when I burned the biscuits last week." Vincent laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Not even then. Though I might have regretted it a little when I tried to eat them." Rebecca smiled and settled deeper into his embrace. The desert night was warm and still, the air carrying the scent of sage and dust and distant rain. This was home. This was everything. This was the life she had claimed for herself, with Vincent's help, with Sarah's support, with her own hard-won courage. The years continued to pass, marked by small joys and occasional hardships. There were droughts that tested their water supplies and their cattle herd. There were illnesses that sent Rebecca's heart into her throat until the fever broke or the cough subsided. There were conflicts with neighboring ranchers over land and water rights, challenges with the territorial government, the constant struggle to make a living in an unforgiving landscape. But through it all, Rebecca and Vincent faced every challenge together, their love deepening and maturing like good wine. They celebrated their children's milestones. Samuel's first successful cattle drive at age 12, Rose learning to read and devouring every book she could get her hands on, Henry showing an unexpected talent for drawing and art, the twins starting school and proving to be complete opposites in temperament. Thomas and Elizabeth had 3 more children over the years, and the York Ranch truly became a family operation, with the 2 brothers working side by side and their children growing up together like a small tribe. Sunday dinners at the ranch house became legendary, with 20 or more people crowded around the long table Vincent had built, passing food and stories and laughter. Rebecca's work at the general store had ended when Samuel was born, but she found other ways to contribute to the community. She helped establish a small library in Tombstone, donating books and organizing reading groups. She worked with Martha Stevens and other ranch women to create a sort of informal support network, making sure new mothers had help and lonely families had company. She became known throughout the territory not as the scarred woman, but as Rebecca York, rancher's wife, mother, friend, someone who could be counted on. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Rebecca back to Tombstone for a rare night away from the children, who were staying with Thomas and Elizabeth. They had dinner at the same hotel where they had eaten on their first date, sitting at the same table by the window. "Do you remember how terrified you were that night?" Vincent asked, smiling at her across the table. "I thought everyone was staring at us," Rebecca admitted. "I suppose some of them were." "They were staring because you were beautiful," Vincent said. "They still are." Rebecca reached across the table and took his hand. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, part of the journey that had brought her to this moment, this life, this profound happiness. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." "I love you too," Vincent said. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stubborn rancher." They walked back to the hotel where they were staying, hand in hand through the dusty streets of Tombstone. The town had changed over the years, some of the wildness tamed, but it was still recognizably the place where Rebecca had arrived so long ago. Frightened and scarred and certain she would spend the rest of her life alone. That night, lying in Vincent's arms in the unfamiliar hotel bed, Rebecca thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. The fire had marked her, had taken her parents and changed her face and left her with scars that would never fully fade. But it had not destroyed her. She had survived, had rebuilt, had found love and family and purpose in the most unexpected places. "Vincent," she said into the darkness, "do you believe in fate?" "I believe we make our own fate," Vincent said after thinking about it. "But I also believe that sometimes the universe puts the right people in the right place at the right time." "Why?" "I was just thinking about that day you walked into the general store," Rebecca said. "What if you had not come in? What if you had gone somewhere else for supplies? What if I had been too afraid to go to dinner with you? Then I would have kept coming back until you said yes," Vincent said with certainty. "I knew from the first moment I saw you that you were someone special. I would not have given up easily." "I am glad you did not have to," Rebecca said. She turned in his arms to face him, her hand coming up to touch his face in the darkness. "You saved my life, you know, not in a dramatic way, but in all the small ways that matter. You taught me to live again." "You saved mine too," Vincent said softly. "I was so focused on the ranch, on work, on just surviving day to day. You showed me what it means to truly live, to love, to build something that matters beyond cattle and land. You gave me a family, Rebecca. You gave me everything." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the easy familiarity of long partnership and the continued spark of genuine desire. Afterward, Rebecca lay awake for a long time, listening to Vincent's steady breathing and thinking about the life waiting for them back at the ranch. 5 children who needed feeding and teaching and loving. A ranch that required constant attention and hard work. A future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. It was not the life she had imagined for herself back in Missouri, before the fire. That Rebecca had dreamed of something smaller, safer, more conventional. But this Rebecca, the one who had survived and struggled and learned to see her own worth, she had built something extraordinary. A love that saw past surfaces. A family that accepted and celebrated everyone's unique strengths and challenges. A place in a community where she was valued not despite her scars, but as a complete person who happened to have scars. The next morning, they rode back to the ranch in the early light, eager to see their children. As the adobe house came into view, Rebecca saw Samuel and Rose waiting on the porch, waving enthusiastically. The sight made her heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. "Welcome home," Rose shouted, running to meet the wagon before it had fully stopped. "Mama, we missed you." Rebecca climbed down and swept her daughter into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. Samuel stood nearby, trying to look grown up and dignified at 12 years old, but Rebecca pulled him into the embrace too, holding both her oldest children close. Henry, Matthew, and Grace came tumbling out of the house moments later, followed by Thomas and Elizabeth looking slightly harried. "They have been awake since dawn waiting for you," Elizabeth said, laughing. "I hope you two got some rest because these children are full of energy today." The day dissolved into the familiar chaos of family life. Rebecca helped Elizabeth make lunch while Vincent and Thomas discussed ranch business, and the children played an elaborate game involving horse thieves and lawmen. After lunch, Rebecca took Grace and Matthew down to the small creek that ran behind the house, letting them splash in the shallow water while she sat on the bank and watched. "Mama, tell us the story about how you and Papa met," Grace demanded, climbing into Rebecca's lap despite being soaking wet. Rebecca had told this story many times over the years, but she never tired of it. "Well," she began, "I was working at the general store in Tombstone and I was very shy. I always tried to hide my face because I was scared of what people would think of my scars." "But Papa did not care about the scars," Matthew chimed in, having heard this story enough times to know the important parts. "That is right," Rebecca said. "Papa looked at me and saw not the scars but the person I was inside, and he helped me learn to see that too." "And then you got married and had us," Grace said happily. "And then we got married and had you," Rebecca confirmed. "And it was the best decision I ever made." That evening, after all the children were finally in bed, Rebecca stood at the window of the bedroom she shared with Vincent, looking out at the star-filled Arizona sky. Vincent came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how much I love this life," Rebecca said. "About how grateful I am for every day, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones," Rebecca said. "They make the good ones that much sweeter." The years continued their steady march forward. Samuel grew into a young man who took over more and more responsibility on the ranch, showing the same steady work ethic as his father. At 18, he began courting a girl from a neighboring ranch, and Rebecca watched with bittersweet pride as her eldest child started to build his own life. Rose developed a passion for teaching and began helping with the small school that had been established in Tombstone. At 16, she was already talking about maybe going east for formal teacher training, though the idea of her daughter being so far away made Rebecca's heart ache. Henry's artistic talent continued to grow, and he began selling drawings and small paintings to people in Tombstone and the surrounding area. Matthew and Grace, now 11 years old, were inseparable despite being very different in personality. Matthew was quiet and studious, while Grace was bold and outgoing. Rebecca and Vincent celebrated their 15th anniversary, then their 20th. The ranch prospered through good years and survived through hard ones. Rebecca's hair began to show threads of gray, and Vincent's face gained new lines from years of sun and wind. But their love remained as strong as ever, tested by time and challenges and emerging stronger for it. One evening in the summer of 1897, when Rebecca was 41 years old, she stood on the porch of the ranch house and watched the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple over the desert. Vincent came to stand beside her, as he had done thousands of times over the years, and took her hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked the familiar question. "About how lucky I am," Rebecca said, "about how different things could have been." "Do you ever think about Missouri?" Vincent asked. "About your parents?" "Sometimes," Rebecca admitted. "I wish they could have known you, known our children. I wish they could see the life I have built, but I like to think they would be proud." "They would be incredibly proud," Vincent said with certainty. "You took unimaginable tragedy and turned it into something beautiful. Not despite the scars, but including them as part of your story." Rebecca leaned into her husband's solid warmth, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sage and sun. "Do you remember what you said to me that day at the store, when I told you I was too scarred to be beautiful?" "I said you were too beautiful to hide," Vincent recalled, "and I meant every word." "You were right," Rebecca said softly. "I wasted so much time hiding, so afraid of being seen, but you taught me that being seen, truly seen, is the greatest gift. Even if it means showing all the broken and damaged parts." "Especially then," Vincent said, "because those broken parts are what make you who you are, strong and compassionate and able to see past surfaces to the real person underneath." They stood together as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, one by one, diamond bright in the vast darkness. Inside the house, Rebecca could hear the sounds of their children, Matthew and Grace arguing good-naturedly about something, Henry's voice calling for someone to come look at his latest drawing. This was her life. This was her family. This was everything she had never dared to dream of back in those dark days after the fire, when she had been certain that scarred women did not get to have happy endings. But she had been wrong. Scarred women got to have whatever endings they claimed for themselves. And Rebecca had claimed joy, love, family, purpose, a life lived fully and without apology. The scars remained, would always remain, but they were no longer the most important thing about her. They were simply part of the tapestry of her life, woven in among all the other threads of joy and sorrow and hard-won wisdom. "I love you," she said to Vincent, as she had said countless times before and would say countless times again. "I love you too," Vincent replied, and in those simple words was everything they had built together, everything they had survived, everything they had become. As the years rolled on, Rebecca and Vincent watched their children grow into adults, make their own choices, build their own lives. Samuel married his sweetheart and started his own small ranch not far from the family property. Rose did go east for teacher training, and though she was gone for 2 years, she came back to Arizona and established a successful school in Tombstone. Henry's artwork gained recognition beyond the territory, and he began receiving commissions from as far away as San Francisco. Matthew studied law and eventually set up a practice in Tombstone. Grace, true to her fearless nature, married a geologist and moved with him to Colorado, though she visited often. Rebecca and Vincent became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. The ranch house that had once echoed with the sounds of their own children filled again with the laughter of grandchildren. Rebecca spent her days teaching little ones to raid, bandaging scraped knees, telling stories, passing on the lessons she had learned about courage and resilience, and seeing past surfaces. In the spring of 1902, Rebecca and Vincent celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a huge gathering at the ranch. All 5 of their children came, along with their spouses and children. Thomas and Elizabeth and their family, friends from Tombstone and the surrounding ranches. The house and yard overflowed with people, food, music, and celebration. Sarah, now silver-haired herself, pulled Rebecca aside during the party. "Look at what you have built," she said, gesturing at the crowd of family and friends. "Do you remember that frightened girl hiding behind the counter at the general store?" "I remember," Rebecca said. "Sometimes I can hardly believe that was me." "It was you," Sarah said. "But it was also not you. That girl was so focused on her scars that she could not see anything else. You learned to see beyond them, and that made all the difference." Later that evening, after most of the guests had left and the children had been put to bed in various rooms throughout the house, Rebecca and Vincent sat together on the porch in their usual spot. The desert night was warm and still, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant cry of a coyote. 25 years, Vincent said wonderingly. "Where did the time go?" "Into this," Rebecca said, gesturing at the house full of sleeping family. "Into building something that matters." "Do you have any regrets?" Vincent asked. Rebecca thought about it seriously because Vincent deserved an honest answer. "I regret that my parents died," she said finally. "I regret the fire and the pain it caused, but do I regret anything that came after? No. Because even the hard parts, even the fear and the doubt, they all led me here. To you, to our children, to this life. And I would not trade this life for anything, not even for a face without scars." "You are remarkable," Vincent said softly. "Do you know that? Absolutely remarkable." "I am just someone who learned to keep going," Rebecca said. "One foot in front of the other, one day at a time. You taught me that. You and our family, you gave me reasons to keep going." "You gave us reasons too," Vincent said. "Rebecca, you have been the heart of this family from the beginning. Your strength, your compassion, your refusal to let circumstances defeat you, that is what made all of this possible." Rebecca leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder, feeling the solid, dependable warmth of him. 25 years of marriage, and she still felt a thrill when he touched her, still felt grateful every morning to wake up beside him. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Rebecca and Vincent grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. When Samuel's oldest son turned 18 and announced his intention to take over the family ranch someday, Rebecca felt a profound sense of continuity, of legacy extending beyond her own life. In the summer of 1910, on a warm evening very much like that first night when Vincent had walked into the general store in Tombstone, Rebecca stood on the porch and looked out at the land she had called home for nearly 3 decades. She was 54 years old now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with years of sun and laughter and occasional tears. The scars were still there, faded somewhat with time but still visible, still marking her as someone who had survived fire and loss. But when Rebecca looked in the mirror these days, she did not see the scars first. She saw a woman who had lived fully, loved deeply, built something lasting. She saw a mother and grandmother, a rancher's wife, a valued member of her community. She saw someone who had learned, slowly and painfully, but thoroughly, that beauty was not about perfection but about authenticity, about living without hiding, about allowing yourself to be truly seen. Vincent came out to join her, moving a little more slowly than he once had, his dark hair now almost completely gray. But his eyes were the same, those steady gray eyes that had seen past her scars from the very beginning and found the woman underneath. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, and Rebecca smiled because after 28 years of marriage, some questions never got old. "About how far we have come," she said. "About all the things that had to happen, good and bad, to bring us to this moment." "Would you change anything?" Vincent asked. "Not a single thing," Rebecca said firmly. "Because every choice, every challenge, every moment of fear or joy or pain, It all led me exactly where I needed to be. Here with you, with this family in this life." Vincent pulled her close, and they stood together in the gathering twilight, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something extraordinary together. The ranch spread out around them, testament to their hard work and determination. Inside the house, Rebecca could hear the sounds of family. Several of their children and grandchildren were staying for a few days, and the familiar chaos of young voices filled her with contentment. "I love you," Vincent said. "Then, now, always." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rebecca York." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Rebecca replied. "You taught me to see myself differently. You taught me that scars do not define us, they are just part of our story." "You taught me about real beauty," Vincent said. "The kind that comes from strength and courage and a heart that refuses to give up. That is the beauty I saw in you from the beginning, and it only grows more radiant with time." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Rebecca thought about that terrified young woman who had arrived in Tombstone all those years ago, convinced that her life was effectively over, that no one would ever see past her damaged face to the person she was inside. She wanted to go back and tell that girl that everything was going to be okay, that she was going to find love and family and purpose beyond anything she could imagine, that her scars would become simply one part of a much larger, richer story. But that girl was gone, transformed by time and experience and love into this woman standing on this porch, surrounded by the life she had built. And that transformation, painful as parts of it had been, was the real story. Not the fire, not the scars, but what came after. The courage to keep living, the willingness to be seen, the acceptance of love when it was offered, the determination to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. "Come inside," Vincent said gently. "Grace is trying to get the grandchildren to settle down for bed, and she looks like she could use some help." Rebecca laughed and let Vincent lead her inside, into the warm light and noise and love of family. This was her life, messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect all at once. This was what it meant to be truly beautiful, not hiding or pretending but showing up fully and completely, scars and all. And as she moved through the evening, helping with children, laughing at stories, sitting close to Vincent whenever she could, Rebecca felt a deep sense of gratitude for every moment that had led her here. For the fire that had marked her, for the courage that had brought her to Arizona, for the cowboy who had looked at her and seen not scars but beauty, for the life they had built together one day at a time. She was too scarred to be conventionally beautiful, perhaps. But Vincent had been right all those years ago when he told her she was too beautiful to hide. Because true beauty, Rebecca had learned, was never about appearance. It was about living authentically, loving completely, and having the courage to show the world exactly who you are. And on that warm Arizona evening, surrounded by the family she and Vincent had created, Rebecca York knew without a doubt that she was, finally and completely, exactly who she was meant to be. Scarred, yes, but also loved, fulfilled, and truly, deeply beautiful in all the ways that mattered most.